Hello, everyone. I hope you're doing well today. In this video, we are going to be discussing a unique issue, and that is expectations and imagination within the Star Citizen bubble. That includes CIG, the community, content creators, just any players that really involve themselves within Star Citizen. Now, I know this is going to be a bit of an opinionated video, not going to be too much news within here, so just a heads up going into that. But before we get into it, if you are enjoying the content, feel free to subscribe. I do have channel memberships open if you wanted to go the extra mile, and feel free to join the community Discord. I'll have a link for that down below. I apologize if my voice sounds a little raspy or just a little off. Feeling a little bit under the weather today, but without further ado, let's get into the issue with expectations and imagination within Star Citizen. Now, I first want to say that expectations and imagination are something completely normal and natural for literally any aspect of your life. So, I'm not going to sit here and pretend like it's a Star Citizen issue. I'm also not going to pretend like this is the only game within the gaming industry where expectations and imaginations come and just bite you back in the ass after a bit of time or bite the developers in the ass after a little bit of time. There is a whole lot of this that happen within the gaming industry and just life as a whole. Now, again, this is completely normal for any game development at this point, and I think we're seeing this in real time with Battlefield 6. A ton of people had a lot of expectations for that game. They imagined how cool it could be, especially after all the leaks and data mines and everything that came out before the official reveal. That drove up expectations a ton because you're able to imagine so much more. You're able to do it without really any limits. And then once we get to the actual reveal, the gameplay, the betas, everything, people are just disappointed because their expectations and their imagination drove that so high. And of course, you have to come back to reality at some point, and that typically happens whenever the game is revealed and you're able to actually get your hands on it. Now, that being said, that's kind of like the normal cycle of it for most games. But for Star Citizen, it's like if you did that a million times over and then you kind of just try to digest your feelings and the direction of the game. And that's kind of where we're at with it. It's almost like we've gotten so much marketing material, so much communication, so much everything from CIG over the past decade or so that it's almost impossible to form a legitimate opinion as to exactly where this game is supposed to go and what it's supposed to release and how it's supposed to feel at release. And of course, we can use our imaginations, but that's probably just going to drive up expectations even more. Though, at the same time, CIG is kind of the one that is pushing those expectations even higher and then pretty consistently not exceeding them. As a matter of fact, falling very short of a lot of the expectations that they set themselves. Now, the reason why I wanted to talk about this video is because we have CitizenCon Direct coming up in the next roughly month and a half, maybe a little bit less. And that's typically whenever everything gets really hype. We see a lot of footage and stuff that's very exciting and it looks really cool. And it drives our imaginations through the roof. Now, don't get me wrong, I kind of love it. It's one of my favorite things to have these big events, even if it is somewhat unrealistic. Just the pure joy of looking at things that excite you is fun, regardless of what anyone says. That is just kind of what I believe in. I love kind of taking part in these events. Now, let's look back at last year's CitizenCon, especially with the base building presentation and the space station presentation. Now, the base building presentation was a little bit more grounded. I'll have a lot of that footage going on in the background, but they showed off, of course, a lot of first person gameplay of you actually kind of going around and doing things and showing it from a first person perspective, which I appreciated because it gives us more of a grounded expectation as to what it could be like. But that being said, if you look at the things that are happening in the background, the things that are just going on within these spaces, they are very well scripted, is I think a good way of putting it. It's almost like a well-oiled machine that is just happening in real time. And you can very clearly see that with, the ships going in and out of picking things up and dropping things off and just everything going on. It seems a little bit more, scripted. And then we get to the space station presentation. And whilst a lot of the things that we saw were most likely in engine and we saw a bunch of assets that will probably be there when these release, for the most part, this is a completely like picture perfect representation of what you would imagine when you think of a space station, where everything is happening the way it should be. Everyone is going by their rules. We have air traffic controllers actually helping you out within your hangar, getting you in and out, pulling up freight elevator stuff for you. You have this captain that's walking around the ship, basically just giving orders, doing things that a captain would do. You have people in the hangars actually directing pilots to different ships or whatever, and then they let them take off. All this really cool stuff that is very, very well scripted and really gives us a lot to imagine when it comes to the possibilities of these space stations. I mean, it really, really makes you start to think when you see these things like, oh my gosh, this could be really cool. And this could be such a cool part of progression in the game and your org growing and building such a massive space station. I mean, it sounds so cool and it looks so cool. But then we have to try and bring ourselves back to reality a little bit. This is where CIG really starts to fall short, and it starts with these big presentations that are well scripted and look really cool. We get them, and then we have absolute silence for typically a very long time. It can be up to a couple months, it can be up to a couple years. And then when we inevitably have to get an update on that feature or system, it typically falls short of our expectations. And that's because our expectations are set off of a very unrealistic presentation that drives our imagination into so many corners to the point where there's no way CIG can possibly keep up with those expectations. And as much as I want to sit here and try and come up with some sort of way that CIG can get past this so that instead of making us imagine these things and kind of get really high expectations for different features and systems, there's no real solution here. And I think the basic answer for that is that imagination sells. And it's very obvious it does, especially with something like Star Citizen. And this really exists in almost every single corner of this project. I hate to say it, but it really does. And one of the best examples of this is if you look at any single ship on the pledge store and go ahead and just look at the concept art for that ship. And my favorite example, this two of my favorite examples are the Liberator and the Kraken. Both have some amazing concept art. There's one for the Liberator I really like where it's like it's landed in and you can see like multiple other Liberators coming in the background and it's like an active war zone dropping off a tank. There's a lot of explosions. It just looks really, really cool. It's a really cool environment and piece of concept art. And then there's a bunch for the Kraken where it shows ships taking off the Kraken. You have tons of ships already landed on it or flying around the ship itself. You have ships deploying from the hangar. There's a ton of stuff there that makes it give off this really cool vibe for the Kraken. And then they sell that ship based off of that concept art. And that really works because you're able to use your imagination when you see these really cool pieces of concept art. Even if the ship isn't released, you're like, well, damn, that looks really cool. I would love to do that. I can imagine myself doing that with so many friends and getting the possibility of being able to raid these bases or fly around in this absolute flying fortress with a bunch of other ships around me. It just sounds so cool. And then you buy the ship, and then it inevitably releases, and it's not quite what you thought it would be. And this really, again, applies to everything we've talked about today. The space stations, the base building, anything they've shown off in any content they've put out for CIG. And as much as I, hate to say it, it's just something that works really well in terms of funding and making money from their customers. Now, again, like we talked about at the beginning of this video, sometimes failing to meet those expectations or even exceeding those expectations happens in every single game that's really ever existed that's had any sort of marketing or presentations or anything like that. It's just kind of how it works. For CIG and Star Citizen, again, this game has been around for at this point 12 to 13 years, and it's kind of been the same loop over and over again. And that's so obviously why many players are fed up, including myself in a lot of ways. As much as I love to sit around and just imagine the excitement of 1.0 and all the things they've shown off for it, it's really hard to do that for, 8, 9, 10 months until the next presentation. And then of course, we're going to see a lot of cool things, and I know it's going to get a lot more exciting within the community for a little bit. But I really hope that after that presentation drops and we get that surge of hype, they actually show progress towards getting those things not only in the game, but pushing towards 1.0 rather than kind of what we've been seeing over the past few years. And I really think we're going to see the make or break of that in the next like year and a half or so. There's very clearly a lot of people fed up, but at the same time, we know that they're pushing Squadron out the door. And if Squadron is a solid product and we actually see them switch their heads from Squadron to Star Citizen once that product releases, then I think a lot of people kind of hop back on board that train because they know, hey, what they've been making is actually really solid, and we actually have faith that they can make Star Citizen at this point and create a game that actually meets our expectations. Now, that again will never excuse the past 10 to 12 years of just bullshittery that CIG has put out, and that is undeniable. That has happened for sure. But again, if they put their heads down and slowly but surely work and show progress towards 1.0, then I think you're really going to cause at least much less frustration towards fans, because seeing a lack of progress and then seeing these huge announcements and then seeing a lack of progress is just tiring. And I think seeing progress at the very least will show that something is happening behind the scenes, and all the people that have been put a ton of money and a bunch of time into this project can actually see that there is something at the end of the tunnel rather than it just being an endless loop of what we've been doing for the past decade. And I know this video has been a bit of a rant, and I've gone many different places with this subject, but going back to the original topic of imagination and expectation, that is, again, a normal part of daily human life. It's a normal part of video game cycles of imagining something, the possibilities. In if you're more experienced, sometimes you can keep those expectations a little bit more in check, and some people don't do that nearly as well. And no matter what, expectations will be met, surpassed, or shorted, and that's just kind of how it goes. But for CIG, we've been doing that cycle for just so long. And I know that a lot of people are still here because they believe in the project and they want that end goal of 1.0 and what Star Citizen could be. And I'm absolutely with you on that. That's why I'm here. Not because I enjoy being told these things and then being left in the dark for months or years at a time. It's really because I believe that this game could be just a ton of fun. But at the end of the day, I think it's about time CIG starts moving towards making real progress and showing that, rather than letting us just kind of ride our imaginations out after every single big announcement, every single Citizen Con. And I think that if they start doing that, hopefully around when Squadron releases, or just starting with this year's CitizenCon, I think it could help a ton with not only getting new players on board that want to actually see this project and actually play it while it progresses, but for all the old players that have been here, that have been sticking around for a long time, actually letting them see in-game progress towards that 1.0 goal, I think will bring so much more faith in this rather than what we currently have, which is hopium, copium, whatever you want to call it. Besides that, though, that really is going to do it for this video. Again, I don't mean any hate or too much negativity. I just want to be critical of CIG and the choices and decisions they've been making over the past few years that have really caused so much frustration within the community, and the sheer use of our imagination to make them so much money, which undeniably has worked, but hopefully we can get to a point where it's less imagination and more actual literal progress in the game. And that's really what I'm hoping for within the, again, hopefully near future. Outside of that, again, thank you so much for watching and sticking around to the end. I would love to hear your thoughts on this topic down below, whether you agree, disagree with me, or just want to say something really random. Whatever it is, I would love to hear your thoughts. I do appreciate you. I hope you have a wonderful day, and I will see you in the next video.